you've walked into being uncomfortable. That's what my entire presentation is going to do, make you feel uncomfortable. Okay, there are 3 exercises, and at one point I have a folder right here that I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, and you're going to raise your hand to tell me whether they're uncomfortable, or not raise your hand if you're just fine with them. But we won't there yet.
So we're all going to be being honest, yeah? Or lying for fun?
Oh, sorry. Also, this presentation is not about privilegedness, fragile, or no generalizations, okay? Nothing like that. So any of the stories you tell or anything you share is pretty much just going to be about your personal experience only. Okay. Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. Like if you want to know.
No.
All right, so thank you for coming back from lunch. I know it's tempting to just like dip out and abandon, but we're glad you're here, especially for this one. Really, really excited for this session. So my good friend here, clearly, because we're bantering, Andrae Rose, he works here at Sapien. He's a graphic designer and web designer. Many years experience, lots and lots of clients, but we're not here to talk about that. So I guess we can just go right into it.
Okay.
You already gave an
Yes. So as Asha said, so my job here is that I'm a UX designer. So I do a lot of graphic and web stuff. I've done some IA work as well. But I also, background is also in communication too. So, and I started working on this presentation when I was finishing grad school, trying to figure out, as all of you guys are creative people, how are we actually in the design process keeping our biases out of the design process? And so that's generally what this conversation is really going to be about. I'm going to be going through a presentation, but there are going to be questions that I'm going to ask you guys, and don't be scared to share. Okay, I like discussion presentations. Okay, no one's going to judge you. If you feel like you're getting judged in here, Asha is like security; she will bounce them out. Okay.
Go to contact.
Don't let the jacket fool you. She's straight up bouncer. Okay, she will lift you up and toss you. But I want everyone to also be familiar with the rules behind me. Okay, number 7 is probably the most important. Okay, because we might not always agree on something, but at the end of it, I would like us all to leave with a very open understanding that we have differences. Okay, so should we get started? Okay. Okay. So I based all of this on a theory. And that theory is that every one of us in here, creatives, we have a way to improve fair representation in what we do. Whether that is media, whether that media is digital or print, we as creatives are going to focus on the role that we play in shaping the perception about diversity. When in fact, those who create content that helps target audience understand our clients' products and services, we inform the influencers, we persuade them, the audiences. We can also drive conversations of diversity and inclusion. Creatives affect all aspects of society. The decisions we make as creatives make all forms of media have a profound, though often, consequences on both individuals and collectives. There's also to encompass our clients, that their stakeholders and their immediate target audiences. So there are a lot of groups that we actually affect in the work that we create. Okay. What we create may innovate a sense of freedom at times, but if it's influenced by any of the biases that we have, it can have a caustic effect. It can cause discrimination, disease, and segregation. So, real question for you guys is, how many of you ever sat in like a diversity inclusion conversation? Anyone? They're kind of like dry. Like, don't upset my coworker. Don't be very sympathetic to. They're really dry. They don't really go in depth to make you challenge yourself. And I've sat through a lot of government ones, and most of the time you just want to hunt Pokemon instead of listening. That's how interesting they are. But inclusion process help us as creatives critically sound and social conscious choices in complex situations. It fosters actions that may take the viewpoints of those that are underrepresented. It relates all of our diversities. It broadens and deepens the equity and accessibility of all digital, visual, and physical environments. So how many people in here know what the actual definition of diversity is? 1, 2, okay. Very broad definition, okay. definition is not only broad, but it covers a lot and challenges what we as creatives are faced with in our day-to-day client-focused deliverables. Especially in a time when, especially now, diversity and inclusion are very hot button topics. Everyone and anyone, agencies, small businesses, commercial clients, they're all on eggshells now. Okay, I mean, we all remember what happened with H&M. There are no literally the stores in South Africa are like pretty much probably burning by now. But I mean, it's a very hot topic, and the littlest things can just upset an audience. So when it comes to the design and its process, it is a vast and as broad of a subject as diversity. So design and diversity, they run parallel to each other. It too, like the definition of diversity, is a complex subject matter. Nonetheless, its design process is considered in both professional, focused, and culturally expansive ways. Like diversity, design is considered a basic component of humanity, where it is neither an intellectual nor material affair, but simply an integral part of society, necessary for everyone in civilized society. Okay. So, you know, everyone pat yourself on the back because we are all a part of society here, and what we create is a part of and influences society. However, can't let that get rooted in our egos, because, you know, us creative people, we have those big flaring egos, but let's not get it ahead of ourselves. It is still essential for creatives to work within a questioning framework that integrates marginalizing groups and peripheral point of views. Take together, again, design and diversity provides 4 cross-cutting themes. It will help us reveal the consequences of our work. It's going to polarize canons. It's going to empower those that are underdeserved in our work, and it's going to start to promote them better. Okay? So these are key takeaways that I'm hoping we're going to go through these, but I'm hoping that at the end of this presentation and when we start really discussing, that we'll have a good understanding about everything. The challenge your own bias, that's where you have your index card, you're going to write what bias you have. Okay, and if you're comfortable sharing, I'm going to call you out. I will share mine. Mine is written right here. Okay, written right here. And it's an exact copy of the one that I have taped to the mirror at home, so I can always look at it and call myself out on it. Okay, so diversity 101. We know this one. We saw it by the definition. In fact, remember earlier, you know, we saw that definition and how very broad it was and how it covered diversity as a whole. And I don't have that much time, but even if I did, we still would not be able to cover what diversity really is and how it affects all of us. There is also the oversaturated of diversity, where, you know, a client would have you put as much as possible as diversity and it still will miss the mark. Maybe at some point they will put products together, or they will have us put products together that it pulls in every known stereotype possible and not know it. For example, you have a client that wants to discuss marijuana and alcoholism in high schoolers. And they give you an image that they want you to use, or they give you content that they want you to use. However, they're not following any of the data. The data is broad, but the image that they provided only has one minority group in there. Okay, one visual minority group in there. This could cause the natural reaction of discomfort and disgust with that group. It could also offend the race that was overly saturated. And so we want to be able to know when too much or too little is a problem, and how to hit that data-driven amount of diversity needed to tell the correct story. So, the next one. This is where you guys, I challenge you to write your bias. Okay. This one, of course, is easy. It's own your bias. Leave your biases out of the design process. I mean, it is hard to say that, but we all have biases. If you have a mind, you have a bias. Okay, it might have created itself or rooted itself from when you grew up, where you grew up, but we all have biases. Because full acceptance of our bias is a major step of understanding diversity and how it needs to be addressed. Well, also it's also good for a life kind of standpoint as well. Inevitably, both creatives and clients bring their biases to all projects. These biases may come through during interviews, research, the design process, design styles, and even the implementation and solution. So, you guys writing? Comfortable? Comfortable? You want me to share mine? Yeah, write it. Start writing. You have all the time to do this presentation, okay? I mean, if you want, I can share mine. It will help push the discussion. Okay, so I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, okay? My mother grew up in the segregation era, and she saw the worst of it. She saw lynchings, she saw kidnappings, she saw the worst, the whites only. And so when she had kids, she put us in that mindset that we are to never trust white people, okay? Now, the problem is that my spouse is white. My best man at my wedding is white. My boss, even though we bump heads, he's white. Former coworker who's right here, she's white. So me having that mindset of saying, grow up in that mindset of saying that, hey, no, I should not trust white people, that it just doesn't work. And I mean, literally, this is right what it says. Yeah. And I have this exact one taped to a mirror at home. Because there are times my spouse has to check me. He'll check me quickly, but hey, watch what you're saying. You know, I'm here. It happens, it's there. And these biases they might not have come today. They might be early, but they might have, over the years, they might have shown up. And that's the scary thing too, because it's hard to really differentiate how to solve it if you're not really willing to face it. So again, if you can write it, take it home with you, stick it on a mirror, you're able to constantly say, hey, that's a bias I need to work on. That's something that's bothering me. Maybe I'm actually bringing that into my work. Okay. So why is diversity important to us? For this section of discussion, we will try to go into detail again about the societal issues and the creative issues that we deal with as creatives. And understand exactly how, what we do with our our clients, their stakeholders, their audience, and how diversity actually affects their products and services. Audience who are affected about the work that we create, and if it doesn't have fair representation, they don't actually feel comfortable with any faith in that product or service. Government and public sector. So I am a government and public sector creative. In government work, especially in this atmosphere now, diversity is very important. I mean, the wrong thing, the wrong statement, the wrong work, the wrong image is a political nightmare. It's a PR nightmare for any agency. However, and when it comes to these agencies, they give us so much data. And that data doesn't data doesn't talk diversity. It's up to us to better represent that data. And for what that data also doesn't do, it doesn't talk stereotypes. So the image that I have right behind me is called Screen to Save. It is an initiative that seeks to increase colorectal screenings for rates among people who need it the most, men, women, age 50 and older, for racial, ethnic, diverse communities and in rural areas. The story behind this is that who was at the first Women's March last year? Okay, cool. So that following Monday, I had a presentation with my boss, Chuck, about this graphic. And this graphic is a lot more cleaned up. There's not as many facial features as there were. And so our client were all women. Okay. And they all had this, we hate men are wrong, it was pretty much, they were just anger towards us. Okay, so Chuck is presenting this graphic. And I start to nudge Chuck. I'm like, Chuck, you made the black woman too angry looking. At the point, he had eyebrows and they were right down. He's like, I don't see it. I was like, she's angry looking. The client's gonna focus in right on it. 5 minutes within the presentation, why is the black woman so angry? I don't understand that. Do you have a problem with black women? Chuck was like, whoa! Whoa, no. And then they started to go off on everything. They were like, I don't understand why the white people all have to have blonde hair. I don't understand why. And they just started to nitpick on just everything. You just nitpick. And we took this graphic and we just took all the facial features off, just all of it. Like, we had to neutralize it so much that even the littlest thing wouldn't cause a problem. But Chuck, if you ever meet Chuck, I mean, we all have the same last name. People think that we're father and son. We actually play that role too. The guy is so far from being, anti-feminist. He's so far from being racist. But they literally were after him. Like, they would have castrated us in that meeting. That's how angry they were. No, I'm not kidding. They were that angry with us. And I even try to, kind of get us to be a little bit more, ha ha ha. I said, hey, Chuck, you did make her look like Medea. Nope, that didn't work either. They just really went off on us. But this graphic went live, yes.
I'm looking at the graphic.
Yep.
And the first thing that comes to my mind is, I don't see one gray hair up there.
Oh, there isn't.
And for most people, colorectal screening is usually 50 and older.
Yeah.
50 is usually when they say start.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody up there that looks like they're 50. Even based on,
So you're saying I need to age it more?
well, at least have somebody in there that looks like they're 50 or older.
I think that's probably why we end up taking some people out, because they were just like, we don't like that, we don't like that. Yeah.
If I'm looking at this from an audience perspective,
Yeah.
I'm thinking that the purpose of this is to promote colorectal screening.
Yep.
The audience I usually want to reach first
Yep.
is going to be that 50 and older crowd. So if I'm looking at this as a 50 or 60-year-old, do I see myself in this?
Yeah.
Do
And
I
I-
recognize this is for me?
And that's understandable. I definitely could see that, that's probably what's missing as well. And you probably would have been in that meeting ready to castrate us too.
I'm just giving feedback.
Oh, no, I want the feedback, because then I can tell Chuck, hey, Chuck, we had another one. Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about diversity, I recognize just from your comment about the need for diversity beyond just race, gender,
Yeah.
but also age, because
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I'm over 50, but it didn't even occur to me about showing someone with gray hair, because I don't have gray hair. But to people who may identify more with that certain age population, that makes perfect sense to me.
So I'm going to make sure I let Chuck know this. You guys called him out, I'll make sure I let him know this.
When I'm thinking diversity, I'm thinking beyond, like you were saying,
Yeah.
those things, it gets into diversity of thought, diversity. It is a spectrum
Yeah.
of, we're not talking black and white, we're talking about all the spectrums that
Yeah.
are between that. And those spectrums can have different characteristics.
And so commercial clients have it just as worse, Diversity faux pas can find their products or services boycotted. The wrong created content and or the most well-developed visual story can turn off a member of audiences immediately. So for example, anyone remember this story? Yeah. So Shea Moisturizer wanted to, they went after a market, their target audience is African-American women with a certain course of hair, right? I just learned that too. There's a coarse type of hair that shea butter goes after, moisturizer goes after. However, their ad that came out, it was biracial women and white women. And so their target audience felt completely shut out. And the Twitter storm, the social media storm was pretty much boycott the product. And I don't even think Shea even came up fast enough to apologize. It was pretty much, we're no longer using this, we're gonna make our own products, we're gonna buy from this, we're gonna buy from that, we refuse it. But then you have to start to think though, when it comes to this kind of problem, were the people in the marketing thinking, hey, our boss wants to go after another audience because we're doing poorly there. We're doing poorly with Caucasian women or biracial women. How do we market to them? So this can be a complete double-edged sword where you are going after your target, you completely forget your target audience because you're also trying to go after a new audience. Maybe Shea Moisturizer was not trying to upset. We don't know that. A lot of these companies like to say hush, hush. But you have to kind of ride that fence and say maybe, maybe they were trying to do this for a reason? And maybe they weren't trying to upset. But again, like I said, in the end, diversity is a very tricky subject, especially for creatives. It's a double-edged sword at that point. We will find ourselves cut by it in any form or fashion. So there is no doubt that design and diversity play a big part in the shape of society. The targeted audience we create to spend more time being influenced by the visual content that we actually create and we write than they do self-explored research. So what we do, they actually are influenced by. You know, they don't, especially now. It seems like people do not go out and do their own self-research. They rely on us to actually influence them and tell them what is right, what they should invest in, and what they should buy. Content design and messages created are absorbed to help shape the perceptions of our clients and their target audiences of what products to buy, services to invest in, whether it's cool or fun, or even if it's scary or unappealing. The creative content can also influence how target audiences see members of other groups as well, and how they see themselves. So one of the biggest concerns about creating content that portrays diverse communities and is stereotyping. Portraying members of particular visual minority groups in small number is generally in whatever small number of roles. This is particularly true when stereotype is negative. Negative stereotypes is pretty much the big thing. This is particularly true. For instance, visual minorities are stereotypically seen as criminals. Or villains by both in digital media, where they make up 1/3 of the perpetrators, as opposed to our actual figures that show that they make up, their arrest reports are 1 in 5. Anyone knows the one diversity group, the one minority group that's probably faces the most discrimination?
In what medium?
Huh?
In what medium?
And not in just, well, actually in digital and print media, yeah. We'll take it. Yes, but no.
APIs as a group, as a general group. APIs as a general group, specific elements.
Well, yeah. Anyone else? Nope. What else? Anyone else will try?
Differently abled?
Huh?
Differently abled?
Yes. Are disabled defined? Okay. If we as creators are asked to show individuals with disabilities, stereotypes would have us to believe they are invisible minorities, though a large segment of the population has some kind of physical or mental disability. When we are creatives are asked to communicate a product or service with the disability, we tend to show them in the most stereotypical or degrading way possible. The most common stereotypes of persons with disabilities are too often the remarkable hero, the dependent victim, or the villain. The full range of disabilities are always overlooked. Overlooked or underrepresented as well. Not everyone has a physical disability. I chose Daredevil, and there's a reason why I chose Daredevil. The reason why I chose Daredevil for when it comes to remarkable or the heroic is because if we see the movies, it's always a person that is not blind. It's a person that can see. You know, the actor actually can see. Where Ben Affleck didn't do any of his stunts in Daredevil. You know, so they could have had a blind actor. You know, this would have given fair representation to those who are blind. But they chose Ben Affleck. Why? Yes, because he's a face, everyone loves him, blah, blah, blah. I don't. I think he did a horrible job with Batman, but I'm just biased about that. But they could have easily found a blind actor. It would have given another job to a person with disability, but they chose him. We didn't need to know that the blind actor wasn't doing his own stunts. Most actors don't do their own stunts. But this was a prime example. So with us, we know what pity is, but with remarkable disability, it's also known as super crips. Literally, this is a stereotype, right? They call them super crips. If you see someone that has a disability but they can overcome it, they call them super crips. People who conform to individual model by overcoming their disability and becoming normal. That's what a super crip is.
Like the game?
No, not crips.
Okay.
But super crips. So like cripples. So I mean, this is a very, that's literally what they call super crips. I am not kidding you. Even though heroism, superscripts seem to be positive, it's still a stereotype. I mean, the word alone is a stereotype. For it forces audience to believe that individuals who succeed in overcoming a disability are more the norm and not the representation of those who actually live their lives. It makes audience feel better about a condition of a person with a disability without having to accommodate for them. By reinforcing the notion that disability can be overcome if one person with a disability tried hard enough. The next one, of course, is the last one is the villain. So who remembers this, who knows what this movie is? Split. Yeah, Split. Okay. So often have content misrepresented those with disabilities as being the villain. In fact, those with some form of disability are more likely to become the victims. Even if a stereotype is not entirely negative, the creative representation can still do harm. Of course, the hero who overcomes, the victim whose disability isolates them and causes them to resent society, and the villain whose disability causes them generally to just to be the villain and hate everyone. Here's a little side note. Does anyone know, everybody knows what the American Disability Act is, right? Where it pretty much says you can't discriminate against someone with a disability. However, the research for the Fair Labor Standards pretty much says that if you have a disability and the company knows about it, they do not have to pay you the federal minimum wage. They can pay you half of it. Even though you do 8 hours of work and you do your work even, you could do your work better than one of your teammates, and your clients love it, they do not have to pay you the federal minimum wage. It's a law. It's been challenged, but it's still law. Okay, so, but the not so negative stereotypes. Even so-called, what we call positive stereotypes, can have a negative effect because they limit how we as creatives see members of the group, as well as how our clients might see them and try to obtain them to buy their services or products. So for example, hypothetically, our client is Gold's Gym. Gold's Gym wants to go after a certain visual minority, let's just say African Americans, because they feel that African Americans go to the gym all the time, they were born naturally fit, they buy all their products, they wear all their clothes, they're not basing any of this on any kind of data at all, okay? That's what you call a not so negative stereotype. However, you know, not all African Americans are particularly athletic. And many feel inadequate for being bad at something, and may feel inadequate at bad for, you know, Gold's Gym is automatically suddenly leave it that, hey, you guys are natural. You know, this is going to turn off a clientele for them. But that same kind of othering, that same kind of positive stereotyping, Native Americans, Alaska Pacific natives, all generally describe almost similar narrating, focusing almost entirely on negative circumstances with them. Such as poverty, alcoholism, suicide, gamblers, involved in gangs, while also ignoring the historical and social biases that put them in those conditions. Similar narrating thinking could be said about certain religious groups. Content-driven creations usually support cultural stereotypes. For example, terrorism will always have a Middle Eastern, Southeast Asian, or overtone. Okay? Well as showing that culture that is a culture that mistreats women, forces marriages, commits honor killings. Okay, and that's kind of like the product of how, like, especially American society is right now, is that we only want to see Muslims as one thing, and it's always in some kind of negative image. And the thing is, it's like, you know, I have coworkers that are Islamic, and I learned so much about them. Don't have no distrust in them. You know, I trust them more than that from people I grew up with. And I grew up in some very backwood area. But I have complete trust of people I'm meeting as complete strangers than I do of them. And I've known them back home years. But content-driven creation, we've seen a lot of, again, this in society. But the perception can only follow during our creative process. So if what we're working on, if we have these kind of things, these kind of narrow thinkings, it's going to come into our work. It's going to be something that we actually put in our work because we are being programmed to have these biases as we work, as we think, as we research our item. Othering. Anyone knows what othering is? Got one. So othering. We mean any action by which an individual or group becomes mentally classified in someone's mind as not one of us. Rather than always remembering that every person is a complex bundle of emotions, ideas, motivations, reflexes, priorities, and many other subtle aspects, it is sometimes easier to dismiss them as being someone way less than human. And there's a couple of examples of othering. So 2015, 16, 17, we saw a lot of police shootings, and we've seen a lot of mass shootings in schools. And a lot of us, some of us are content strategists, some of us, we are writing, and what we are writing might not always be the correct framing of what we're doing, or what we're saying, or what needs to be said. We could be telling the wrong things, wrong messaging, and it makes one race seem a lot different, or one visual minority treated a lot different than they should be. In the era of Occupy or anti-fascism, the example shows two different Fox News. And it's both the same network. Just one is Fox, the Latin channel for Fox, a Latin network for Fox. But the conservative version of Fox sees the guy who tried to jump over the fence when Obama was in office as a fascist. Who's trying to overthrow government. The Latin one saw them as an Occupy shooter. That was just it. Just simple wording changed. Okay. The next one is an example of two different dealings of 9/11. Okay. One shows a more fair and innocent, while another one shows a darker contrast. So so here's what my question for you guys is: what makes the two different? So both of these kids, they're both products of, they're both, as it says, children of 9/11. But what makes it so different? What makes one darker and one softer than the other?
Well, there's a lot of elements on there that makes that either darker or softer.
Okay.
Part of it is of course, the perception of color of skin.
Yep.
Of a white kid. It's not just white people that died in 9/11.
Yep.
And the perception, because she's white, is she's someone that has someone that died in 9/11.
Yep.
The kid that's on the right, the way he's dressed,
Yep.
It's very dark. The look of, what kind of the facial expression, the background, even the coloration of what's used in the background of the magazine itself,
Mhm.
or the choices that they make around having a black background around the kid on the right versus kind of this light blue, yellowish, tones,
Yep.
much more kind of a happy tone.
Yeah.
Showing the child on the left side. So there's a lot of elements in there that are kind of setting up an environment and a perception, even with taking race out of it.
Yeah.
Was he?
Oops, sorry.
I was going to say, you're missing the words.
Mm.
The child on the left, legacy of love, the children of 9/11. Love is something that we all want,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah.
9/11 is something that happened to us, whereas the child on the right, the individual on the right, I'm assuming he is also a child, children of Bin Laden. For most American audiences, Bin Laden is a negative connotation. And when you put that with a child of his race, dressed the way he is, with all of the things that you described about the photograph, it creates a negative association.
Yeah.
Was he the shoe bomber?
No, that's just a kid.
Oh, okay.
It's a normal kid.
That's why I was just,
Yeah.
I think that association
Yeah.
of, when you saw the shoe bomber.
The other thing that it is the contrast is that just the wording of the children of Bin Laden, it makes the assumption that the man on the right is a child of hatred.
Yeah.
He's a perpetrator of hatred,
Yeah.
because that's what Bin Laden did, versus the little girl on the left.
Yeah.
She's like the victim, so he's a child of the perpetrator, she's a child of the victim.
So, othering effects has the effects of ignoring and minimizing differences within groups. As I said when we talked about Muslims, is that they're always seen as a group of terrorism. That's what we group Muslims. I don't know why, but that's what we group them. Native Americans, Pacific Islanders are still seen as fighting savages for school mascots, or they run shady casinos. The LGBT community, they have their issues. Majority of their issues comes down to, and most recently is gay white men and actually straight black women. There's been a lot of issues with that alone, is that a lot of black women feel that some of the nuances, some of the colloquial terms or whatever that gay white men use, that of course, you know, they culturally appropriate from black women, and then when black women call them on, and they're just like, oh, you're just, you know, you're offended for no reason, blah, 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 you know, or they are so quick to disown black women, but it, you know, it gets to that little war of who did what, who says what. Older generations are slow and grumpy, unable to keep up with the workforce. They are untrainable. And then, of course, the typical stereotype of millennials are they're privileged brats who need constantly to be told how perfect they are. But then again, this kind of gets back to the mascottings for when it comes to othering, is that Native Americans, most people who know anything about Native Americans is only because they're being used as mascots. A lot of schools nowadays are starting to change that. I mean, I think the only place that, even the Cleveland Indians are starting to change. The only place that we have yet to make that change, of course, is the Redskins. I don't think Snyder is ever going to make that change. Anyone knows what invisibility is? Okay. Diversity manifests itself in many other ways. Invisible diversity is the diversity we usually do not see when we meet and interact with others. It can encompass disability, religion, class, regionalism, sexual orientation, and characteristics. Who watched Sesame Street? Good. We'll get the crowd, good. So, anybody know when Sesame Street came on? 1969. It put the country on a clear path of the racial diversity. In 1969, Sesame Street was seen as a palatable experiment that would promote the intellectual, cultural growth of preschoolers, particularly disadvantaged ones, teaching them not only a specific skill, but also a capacity to think for themselves. So Sesame Street has always been that notch to really help our country alone know exactly what it needs to do when it comes to diversity. I mean, the first host was an African American and a Puerto Rican. Okay, in some cases, the issue is not how correctly diversity is portrayed in all forms of media, but whether it's portrayed at all. With strides of diversity improvement, most if not all forms of privilege used to be an all Caucasian affair. In fact, we are now starting to see more and more ads that are visual minority friendly, LGBTQ friendly, and diverse in general. When I get back to LGBT imagery and language being used in marketing, where companies are seeing LGBTQ audiences valued in pink money. Who knows what pink money is? What's pink money?
Pink money is the money that you expect to make from the LGBTQ community for being perceived as LGBTQ friendly.
Yes. The $790 billion of disposable income, and that's only 2012. Recent numbers has it over $1 trillion. And a lot of this becomes because a lot of the LGBT community invest in their own community. Most of those in the community, they weren't close to their families, so they didn't have to worry about giving money to their families, or they started their own businesses, or again, they invested in themselves. But that number keeps growing because we're investing, we're buying within ourselves. And everyone is seeing that's what we need to invest in. Or there are other products and companies that you'd think once were very conservative towards the gay and lesbian community are now saying, hey, there's a market out there for it. There's a $1 trillion industry for it. Let's get involved in that. Gays and lesbians were found very infrequently, though, in ads up until 1990s, unless it dealt with during the AIDS epidemic. Pink money, again, wasn't really seen as an importance there because they weren't really measuring that. They were only measuring the AIDS crisis. However, in 1994, IKEA was one of the first companies that took it upon themselves to say, you know what, we're going to bring the LGBT community into the fold. And they took a risk with this ad. Though the LGBT community to make up between 1% and 5% of the population, in the early 2000 media showed less than 1/3 of 1% of the audience that was identified as being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. This doesn't now include, of course, those ads that are channel specific like logo. Let's see. I'm sorry, that is, oops, I just showed that. Yep, that is the IKEA ad. Okay, so invisibility also overlooks relatively gender types and uses them correctly. How many gender types are in America? Does anyone remember the 2014 Facebook article where they talked about gender types? Anybody know how many there are?
It's like 50 something.
Up higher.
54.
There are exactly 60. But that's here. Our UK family has 70 different types. And the problem with that comes is like, you know, do we know exactly what gender or what noun, pronoun to use when we're talking to people or when we're creating for people? How many people who do proposal work? Does any of that proposal work, are you being gender specific? Are you thinking about it? You know, I've worked on some federal health proposals, and I always see like the man, woman, and I always stop the project manager. I'm like, hey, it's not man and woman anymore. We got to be a little bit more open about who we're talking about. We actually had to do a workshop because one of our coworkers became female to male, and it was sensitivity training, because there are some coworkers that you kind of question, but it was necessary. You know, my company hadn't experienced that yet, and so I remember seeing that email come out, and it was mandatory training, and everyone was there. You know. And the person who was the kind of workshop was about, you know, he gave a conversation. You know, he told the background, and the reason why, and so it was his way of opening to us.
Did he ask for it, or was it just?
Yes and no. So it was necessary because he was going to start using male bathrooms. Okay. Majority of the time that we've known the person, it was always been a she. So he completely cut off the hair, completely started wearing men's clothing, so it was necessary for us to really start to know exactly what pronouns or how to greet, the naming, to just really be sensitive of what was happening. And if you made a mistake, said she, or called him by his former female name, then you were apologetic about it. You weren't so cold-hearted to it. But since I last did this presentation, California has approved the fact that you can have a third gender type on the birth certificates. DC and Oregon, you can have you can really don't have to say what gender you are on your IDs, your driver's license, which is really cool. It's moving us to that next process where we are being very gender neutral. So, and this is where it gets to the really cool things about these three areas. We just need to get more areas and more states to be a little bit more understanding. Now in this atmosphere, it's a little hard, it's a little tough, but for us as creative people that are working with that fair representation, are working with diversity, these are things that we can pretty much learn from, and we can help make those make different genders feel comfortable.
I think there's something to be said. This past Super Bowl, Coke ran an ad campaign called World of Us, and a third shot in, they something to the effect of blank is us, they are us, and they used the word they intentionally referring to the trans community. And it was subtle enough that if you weren't really paying attention to it, you wouldn't pick up on it.
No.
But for the community that it does affect, they pick up on it, and they heard it. It became this sort of rallying point for the community that knows what that term means. But it's subtle enough that the conservative voices of America aren't going to say, oh, well, I didn't hear that word, but great for Coke for making a diversity campaign.
Yeah.
So,
Can I play devil's advocate?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to say, this came up in my mind earlier.
Yeah.
And that you bring
not only that. It's not only that, but it becomes, and that's actually one of the slides I'm going to show. But yeah, so some of the good news that's coming up is especially is that when it comes to bettering of diversity with creatives is, the younger generations, they don't really kind of need our help. Because when they're in elementary school, they're in middle school, they're in high school, they get a more interesting version of diversity. They get washed with it. It's only when they're in their environments that it starts to corrupt their thinking of what diversity, and they start building those biases up. Which goes back to my question. Anybody wants to share their bias?
I will.
Okay.
So for me, I don't think of it as a bias towards a particular racial or ethnic or whatever group. I do tend to have confirmation bias.
Okay.
I think that's shared. Where it's sometimes I have to get out of my own echo chamber and make sure that I'm not affirming my own beliefs, but am willing to listen to others whose beliefs are completely counter.
Yeah.
And not have a knee-jerk reaction.
Okay.
That shows up for me personally, especially when I'm talking to extremely conservative people with extremely conservative views.
Okay.
It's hard for me to keep in mind that I need to respect those views, even though I completely disagree with them.
Yeah. What was rule number 7 was we might not always agree, but we're at least going to stay open about. Anyone else want to share? Yeah.
Oh, sure. So I have a bias. It's about I have this thing, and it's confidence in like my ability to fully understand a knowledge domain. Like I really just believe that I can learn. I can immerse myself in the thing. I can learn, and I can fully understand it. Right, where I'm valuing logic and analysis over experience. Right, like, and it's sort of like whereas I need to just accept that there are limits to my knowledge and my ability to understand certain things, right? And so then I just need to participate in active listening and practicing empathy, not just having empathy, but actively practicing empathy, right? Because not everything can be sort of distilled into like knowledge bites that can be digested and processed in like an analytical and orderly fashion, right? And so I definitely have that bias, and I have to remind myself to stop trying to always try to understand things in a logical fashion, because some things they're not inherently logical, but they're just not. And so you just have to sit with them and be in that space of understanding and listening and experiencing.
Yeah.
So that's the bias.
Anyone this side?
It's amazing. There's more Republican versus Democrats. Republicans versus Democrats, anything to do with the word with Trump, just completely, my mind just closes down.
Yeah, that's understandable. I'm the same way.
It's family, anything, I see a name anywhere, and I can be bad now, but at the same time that my husband has to put me down sometimes, it's just because my in-laws, they voted for him, so I was just saying the bucket.
Yeah.
All supporters are idiots.
Yeah.
Period. But then I had to sort of take a step back. So it's still difficult for me to take a step back from that. But it is, I have to keep reminding myself, or my husband keeps reminding me.
And one on this side? And one, sorry. No one on this side? Okay.
I live in Baltimore City, and I was driving down the road one day, and there was a group of teenagers on the corner, and a group of white teens, and this black teen comes running down the sidewalk, grabs something from one of the white teenagers and starts running down the road. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I've just witnessed a theft. And I was kind of like peeking in my mirrors to like see if I could see the person or something. And as I looked back behind me, the white kids had caught up with him, and they had their arms around each other and they were laughing. And it was just some kind of prank. And it was one of those moments where I was confronted with a bias that was within me that no matter how much I want to say doesn't exist is obviously somewhere in there. So I wouldn't say that's like one of the main bias that I like think about all the time, but it's just like a very impactful moment for me where I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and generally it could be something that small. that you just don't really think about, because there is that what we call unconscious bias as well, that it's so rooted in our thinking that it only rears its nasty little head when, of course, you see something like that. I see it when someone grabs their purse when I'm sitting beside them on Metro. I'm just like, I'm not that gay. That purse is not going to go with me. Get one?
Yeah. So I have a bias against the use and constant use of the word empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time I hear it, I cringe just a little bit, and it just makes me sick.
Okay.
Because I hear it so much, and I feel like it's overused, and I also feel like you don't have to empathize, meaning feel. You don't have to empathize with someone to be a good person.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to empathize with you to design or solve your problem as a designer. I need to. It's like, oh, how does it feel to be, an older person, an older white woman in order to design something to solve your problem? I just need to understand your problem, but I don't need to feel like it. I just need to understand.
Yeah.
And so my bias against that word is just it's a cop out and it's a shortcut.
Okay.
Just not doing the work.
So we're going to move on, but I'm going to pick on some more people. Okay. So what you were talking about, it's called coded gay. Okay. Coded gay is it's usually whenever any fair representation, especially it's going toward the LGBT community, you look at it and you're like, it's gay. Okay. Who remembers the Campbell Soup commercial? Okay, of the two fathers and one trying to be out with Chewbacca, it just didn't work. If you didn't even watch the commercial, your initial reaction was what? That's got to be gay. But you talking about the Super Bowl ad, and you talking about how isn't that a stereotype all on its own? It's generally called coded gay. Okay, but there are things that it's coded Muslim or it's coded, that kind of thinking is out there as well. And this is probably one of the. So.
His example was this is something that spoke to that audience because it was subtle and it was the first time that Coca-Cola had acknowledged that.
So it comes to I guess again to the fair representation. Remember, if we look back at advertisements 10, 20 years ago, we would never have even seen this. I mean, some of the terminology that's used on TV nowadays, you would never have heard, but ever since, what's his face is in office, you can say pretty much anything, get away with it. But again, it all generally comes down to the actual representation of it. If the representation is bad, then yeah, it's horrible. It shouldn't be.
There is actually a case to be made that representation in advertising for the LGBT community is not actually representative at all.
Yeah.
Because corporations have embraced exactly what you have up there. Two white presenting cisgendered men in a couple.
Yeah.
Which leaves out trans people, it leaves out lesbians who aren't gender conforming, it leaves out lesbians in general.
Yeah.
And that is a problem as well.
It's true. So moving on a little bit.
Some angry women.
So.
Which is a stereotype, and which is problematic historically to say phrases like, "Oh, this group of angry women," because.
So stereotyping can become a vicious cycle because when general and target audiences see inaccurate reflections of themselves in creative content, there are less interest in our clients' products, our clients' their services, and just generally in the client all in itself. And a good example of this is but the bottom half actually exists. I just took the photo off and just put a random photo of people doing a selfie. But this example is of the American Diabetes Association, and it's a created content. And the chart, they really don't go together, but it just kind of explain my point. Native Americans, Hispanics, African Americans, and Asian Americans, that they are all increased at developing type 2 diabetes. However, created content, visual imagery, even the infographic the infographic, like right there, the screen to save, doesn't fairly show diversity, the educational pre-warnings would generally fall on deaf ears. The content, though necessary and informative, would turn away its target audiences. And research has shown that members of visual minorities are actually becoming more aware of lack of fair representation, that they won't go to an organization that may be providing the necessary needs for a medical, let's say clinical trials or anything like that. If they see it, if it doesn't represent them, they don't care. It could be life-saving, but if it doesn't speak to them personally, they don't care. And diabetes is really, really big in a lot of visual minority communities. But again, if what they see doesn't speak to them, why bother? They don't trust it. And it could be the cure, but it doesn't represent them. This one right here is my favorite. The flip side of the problem is when diversity is portrayed, but not in a meaningful or genuine way. Dove has this thing where it can never be 100% diverse. And when they put this out, I thought it was the funniest thing, because they don't know why they created these bottles. They wanted to create these bottles to represent different shapes of women's bodies. And these are only two of the nice tweets I found. Some of the other tweets I found, really, they were dropping the F-bomb quick. Well, these are the nice tweets. And this where it portrays, like, what was the recent one for Dub again, with the woman with the T-shirt, and the woman took the Caucasian woman, the black woman took the T-shirt off, and then there was a Caucasian woman. I have never seen a social media storm so quick. I mean, there were African-American women that I am friends with on Facebook that were just like, we are boycotting, we are throwing all of our stuff away. Even the men were like, we're not even using the face wash anymore. I'm just gonna go to the store and buy some new stuff. It was pretty much a public burning of Dove products, because Dove, there are times that Dove can be 100% diverse.
Really, really good commercial just a few years before that.
Yeah.
It's like, what is beautiful to you, and it was really, really good. It became viral. And so I didn't see this.
Yes, but then Dove crash lands and they create something like this. Or then they do the T-shirt thing, and it gets worse and worse for them. They can never ever hit 100%. And it's just like, I know focus groups are completely expensive, but they're necessary. Like, any focus group would have told them that's a no. Any focus group would have told them the T-shirt thing was a no.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Not to start a whole debate on the T-shirt commercial.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't seen the whole commercial, it's the idea that all these women are like part of each other, basically, and it's several races of women taking off their shirt and becoming another woman. So it's a chain of like 4 different women.
So.
And in it, one of them is a black, 2 a white.
So so during when they actually are cutting those commercials, it's called kind of framing. So some people don't always get to see the entire picture. They only see what whoever cuts that commercial wants us to see. So you have already very sensitive people and sensitive target audience, and then when they see white woman to black woman to white woman, it's like, oh, so that's what you think of us. You think that we're filthy. And you think that this product's going to clean us and make us, this. They were even benefiting off the wording alone on the bottles. Like I think the wording is something about clean or better cleaning or something like that. And it was just enough to just, anger people.
The intent is good, but the message obviously didn't think they were there.
It's also historical context, though, because there are plenty of old soap ads that told that. Well, take a darker skinned person, and then through this soap, you'll become a lighter skinned person. So I think their intent was good, but it's just maybe they didn't know about that history, or whoever created it didn't know that. It's important to look back at what had been done before.
So seeing at my time here, I'm gonna try to go a little bit quicker. Moving forward, it goes back to a lot of biases again, and stereotypes are just rooted historically, and it's just how we are absorbed to it as we grow up, as we're around our families, whatever, and so on. Like for example, the historical thing of blackface. Blackface was very, very popular up until the 1950s when African Americans protested, and then it's no more. However, Hollywood still does a lot of ethnic whitewashing. You see it in a lot of movies that you would say, I would think that person would be this race or that race, or couldn't you find someone this race, that race? And then a lot of the excuses are, well, this person has a lineage, or they're half this or half that. And even then, a lot of that doesn't even work with certain communities. For example, these advertisements, you see a lot of darker skinned people are lightened up just so they don't turn off a certain type of audience. But however, oops, sorry, wrong way. But in France, they have made it a law that all models have to have a doctor's note that says they meet a certain BMI, or else that agency gets fined thousands of dollars. And any magazine or publication has to have a label that says this photo was altered, because they are trying to be better when it comes to body. They don't want body shaming. Okay, they don't want unrealistic bodies. Okay. While it would be almost unthinkable for non-specific visual minorities as a representation of certain minorities today, like the 1963 Cleopatra, to the Lone Ranger, but even to the real live action of Rocky Horror. So, anyone know what the misrepresentation of the two Rocky Horrors is?
What was good and what was bad?
That's true. But this goes to a diversity thing. So actually, there is a big difference between a transgender and a transvestite. Okay. And I love Laverne Cox, amazing actress. However, she got slaughtered social media-wise because she's not a transvestite. Okay.
It's not point of
Yeah.
It's not even in the spirit of the original movie.
Yeah. So I mean, she literally got slaughtered because she just wasn't the representation of the original, the horrible cult classic that became popular in the movie theaters. The midnight showings. How many people remember the Oscars are so white? Okay. The thing about this is that it tapped into a passion of users for full awareness. It raised so much for people to actually get involved. I'm losing time, so sorry guys. So I'm actually just gonna go straight to the kind of very end of this. How many people in here have taken the implicit test? The implicit test is where you go and you click through a series of images, and you start to associate what you feel is positive and what you feel is negative. And it's people's faces. So 5 million people have taken this test, probably 5 million and two, because I've taken it several times. 70% of white people, of course, realize that they are more comfortable with white faces being positive. My African Americans, my minorities, we make up 50% that says that Caucasian faces we relate to being positive. So if you get a chance, take this test. There are actually multiple tests. There's if you're comfortable with certain sexes, if you're comfortable with LGBTQ, there's multiple ones. And it really, really says, maybe I need to sit back and really think about this. Okay, so that's my time, guys. There's a little bit more, a couple more exercises, but I actually like where I can actually dig in and converse and talk more than just ramming information down your throats. Okay, yeah, all good.